Whose future should be protected? The victims or the person who caused the harm? And if the consequences for the person who caused that harm are determined by their age, what message does that send? Greetings, this is Like Me Officially podcast. I'm JK, and this is where raw truths meet reflection, where I challenge social narratives, explore self-efficacy, and move beyond surviving life-changing experiences into courage, self-insurance, and thriving. Because if you're anything like me, you'll recognize that life is for living and living freely. Hashtag our time to thrive. So today I'm talking about whose future gets protected and whether age changes what you did. But before I go any further, just a quick note. I will be talking about sexual violence, physical and digital, but no graphical details will be shared in this episode. But if this feels heavy for you, please step away and maybe listen to an earlier episode because you matter more than this episode. Okay, let's get into it. In the UK, there were 123,768 recorded child sexual abuse and exploitation offences in 2024. That's a 6% rise from the previous year. 78% of victims were female, half of the alleged perpetrators under 18 years old. Now, whether that number shocks you or doesn't, whether it feels high or low, it's still one too many, because behind every one of those cases is a real child whose life changed on a day they didn't choose. There's a star who is gearing up to shine their light in society, and due to the actions of another, that light may be dimmed for years to come as they figure out how to navigate a new reality that was forced onto them. Let me tell you a story. Two stories, actually. Story number one. I was a teenager, secondary school, when one of my peers went through this. She moved in the same circles in school as me. She was amazing, beautiful, bubbly, popular, very intelligent. One of those students who didn't really need to study. She was just always on her A star game. She was, in my mind, she was brilliant and accomplished without trying. She was one of those smart, popular girls who was always getting into trouble, but her academics always outshone her troublesome ways. Then one day she didn't come to school. Then that one day turned into a few days, and then a few weeks, then several weeks. There was a small hum within the small girly circles that we had, because it was an all-girls school, that something bad had happened. It was just a hum. No one ever really spelt out the words until they did, but there were a few people who knew, and I just happened to be one of those people who eventually found out what had happened to her. When she came back to school, something had shifted. She seemed more on edge, nervous in a way she had never been before, but she showed up. And I remember just watching her and thinking how determined she is. She is still here, she's still showing up, still outstanding in her academics, still engaging with other people. Because she was that girl. I remember the day that I found out in full what had happened to her. I was walking home from school and I felt this deep sadness that I didn't quite have the words for. I mean, after all, I was a teenager. What do you do with that as a teenager? What do you do when you're told that one of your peers was gang raped? What words do you use? How do you support someone when you are still technically a child yourself? Now, I can't remember the outcome of what happened legally, but what I do remember is that it went to court, and it was a big deal in the sense of the fact that at that time it went to court and people were held accountable. I believe there was a sentence. I think there was, and I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong, but I just remember her determination, and her refusal to disappear. And that was over 30 years ago. Now, the second story, November 2024. A 15-year-old girl travels to meet a boy she thought was her boyfriend. They'd met on Snapchat. I can imagine how she must have felt getting ready that day, that giddy butterfly feeling, thinking about how she looked, whether he would like her, the kind of excitement that only makes sense when you're that age and you're meeting your first boyfriend, maybe for the first time, when everything feels urgent and full of possibility and excitement. She gets to their destination, then two other boys show up. So she must have been in that moment thinking, who are they? I thought I was just meeting A, but now I'm here with B and C. But oh well, she must have thought, boys will be boys. And then suddenly it wasn't okay. She was pressured into having sex, not with one, but with two other people while being filmed. She was told, according to prosecutors, that she feared she'll be thrown into a river if she didn't comply. Just think about that. From butterflies to that kind of terror in a space of minutes, going from excitement about whether he would like her to fearing for her life. And after the ordeal, the boys asked her why she looked so sad. They then went on to buy her a drink, and then they blocked her on social media. You know that feeling when someone you care about unfollows or blocks you? That jolt of rejection, that confusion. Multiply that by 10, then multiply it by 10 again, and add to it the weight of trying to make sense of everything that had just happened to you. That's somewhere close to where she was. Then, January 2025, a different girl, a field, same thing, also filmed. 3 boys, 2 attacks, both planned, both filmed, the footage shared online. Southampton Crown Court, Judge Nicholas Rowland sentenced all 3 to youth rehabilitation orders. His reason, he wanted to avoid unnecessarily criminalising these children. One of the survivors described hearing that sentence like a rock straight to her face. And in her words, he almost made it seem as if what the boys did was not okay, but it was okay in the eyes of the law because they were still children. Over 30 years between my peers' experience and these girls' experiences, the crime hasn't changed. The impact hasn't changed. The weight of what these girls are left with hasn't changed. The only real difference the law clung to was age. Their age mattered, not hers. To understand how this sentence happened, you have to understand where the rules have come from, because this wasn't just one judge having a bad day or misunderstanding what had happened. The rules allowed him to do exactly what he did and make it okay. In the UK, youth, in the eyes of the criminal justice system, means anyone aged 10 to 17. That's the age range covered by the youth justice system. Under 10, a child can't be arrested at all. 18 and over, you're treated as an adult. In between, different rules apply, and those rules tilt in a very specific direction. The sentencing guidelines for young people in England and Wales came into force on the 1st of June 2017. Written by the Sentencing Council. And the Sentencing Council are a body of 15 people, mostly judges and legal professionals. and 1 seat out of the 15 is reserved for someone with experience of the welfare of victims. Just 1 seat. But the thinking behind those guidelines goes back much further, all the way back to 1908. The Children Act 1908, which is also referenced as the Children's Charter, gave children their own separate court system for the first time. Before that, they were trialed as adults. Some were transported, some sent to brutal reformatory schools. The government said they wanted to, and these are the actual words, shut the prison door and open the door of hope. Now, that wasn't a bad thing. It was a necessary thing for 1908. But here's what the justice system, the one built in the early 1900s, also didn't consider: rape. The abuse of women and children by men at that time, it wasn't even fully recognized as criminal in the way we understand it today. That's the foundation, the very base that these guidelines are built on. So we have a framework rooted in a time when the harm being done to these girls today wouldn't even have had a name, and we're still using it. The 2017 guidelines says something specific. It says that when you're sentencing a young person, the approach should be focused on the child or young person as opposed to offense focused. Now, offense focused means what actually happened, to whom, what it cost them. Person focused means who did it, their future, their development. So move away from the offence towards the person. The offence is what happened to these 2 girls. The person is who did it to them, or the people who did it to them. That's the design, and it's been the design since before sexual violence against women and girls was taken seriously at all. Fordingbridge is a small market town in Hampshire. It's where the first attack took place, and it's now given its name to a case at the centre of the national conversation about how the law responds to sexual violence committed by young people. This case isn't the only one of its kind. In Scotland in 2023, a man called Sean Hogg was convicted of raping a 13-year-old girl in a park. He was 17 at the time. The judge openly said, and it's on record, that if this had been committed by someone over 25 years old, he would have received 4 to 5 years in prison. Instead, Hodge only received 270 hours of unpaid work. That was his sentence. The girl's grandfather had promised her that if she went through the whole process, the reporting, the investigation, the trial, all of it, the law would protect her. She said to him afterwards, "You told me to go through this. All this grief and stress, now look what's happened." And that's not a legal argument. That's a broken promise from a grandfather to his daughter. The reason youth carries so much weight in sentencing in neuroscience terms is based on brain development. The fact that the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for risk, impulse control, thinking through consequences, doesn't fully develop until around age 25. And in the UK justice system, that logic applies to anyone aged 10 to 17. So I understand the intention, but in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, the author, Basil van der Kolk, one of the world's leading researchers on trauma and who has spent decades documenting what serious harm does to a developing brain, what rape does to the developing brain of a child who is also, by that same logic, neurologically unfinished. His research shows that severe trauma during those developmental years physically changes the brain. The part responsible for feeling safe, for trusting people, for regulating emotions, for the memory. They don't just bruise, they get reconstructed. So the system uses brain development to reduce what a young offender is held accountable for. It doesn't apply the same science to the young person harmed. The argument runs in one direction towards the offender, not towards the person whose developing brain was structurally altered by what the offender chose to do. And there's something else the research tells us about young people and knowing right from wrong. Studies show that children begin to recognize fairness and understand when something is wrong from as early as 19 months old. By that time, they're between 2 and 5. They react when rules are broken. By adolescence, a teenager has developed abstract reasoning, which is the ability to understand that their decisions affect other people. They're not just following rules to avoid being told off. They know. The research is also clear that by adolescence, young people can distinguish moral issues from social conventions. They understand consequences. They understand harm. So can we honestly say that boys who planned this, who coordinated, brought a knife, who filmed, who then shared the film online, didn't know what they were doing and didn't know that what they were doing was wrong? Knowing something is wrong and doing it anyway, does that really have anything to do with age? Or is it choice? Let's not forget what else happened here. It was filmed. The footage was shared. A physical assault has an endpoint. At some point, it stops. When it's filmed and shared, it doesn't stop. There is no endpoint, especially when it gets online. That footage exists somewhere in a digital ecosystem right now, and those girls know that. They live inside that knowledge every single day, not as a memory, not as an aftermath, but as a present tense reality that doesn't switch off. In 2024, the most common platform recorded in child sexual abuse cases by police was Snapchat, appearing in 54% of all cases. They met the perpetrators on Snapchat. Now, to be fair, Snapchat has introduced new safety features for teenagers in recent years. Enhanced protections against suspicious contacts, better safeguards around who makes contact, the ability to block and report in a single action. Meta has done similar work on Instagram. These are steps. They're not nothing. But here's my question. If the technology can identify and remove over 600,000 accounts linked to predatory behavior, which Meta reported doing in the first half of 2025 alone, then why can a predator still find a teenage girl on the same platform, build enough trust for her to travel to meet him, and use those same digital tools to coordinate and then share the footage of what he did? The features exist. The harm still happened. There's a gap between what platforms say they do and what young people actually experience. And that gap has a cost. The law treats filming as an aggregating factor, something that makes it slightly worse on paper, but researchers describe digital distribution as an entirely separate ongoing violation because a victim can never fully know who has seen it, where it's been shared, or when it might resurface. These boys didn't commit one crime. They committed several: physical, coercive, digital. Sharing intimate images without consent is a criminal offence in its own right. Multiple crimes, all covered by youth rehabilitation order. The Fordingbridge survivor told The Times, "I feel like I'm the one being punished. I don't think she's wrong. I think society is also being punished by this verdict, because if the message is that legally and officially your age protects you from real consequence for sexual harm, then what does that do? Does it inadvertently give some young people permission? Does it signal the consequences won't really be there?" I'm asking because I genuinely don't know, but I think it's a question I can't afford not to ask. In 2024, the government pledged in its manifesto to halve violence against women and girls within a decade. 1 in 8 women in the UK experiences domestic abuse, sexual assault, or stalking every year. Children account for 40% of all victims of sexual offences in this country, the UK, despite making up just 20% of the population. As of 2024, proven sexual offences committed by children rose by the third consecutive year. The Violence Against Women and Girls strategy published in December 2025 calls prevention the cornerstone of halving these numbers. Education, relationship skills, tackling misogyny in schools. Now, all of that matters, and I want to ask directly, if you are a parent, teacher, a governor, a school leader, what has your school, college, or university actually put in place to prevent this kind of harm? Not a leaflet or an assembly. What is the actual plan? What are young people being explicitly taught about consent, coercion, digital safety, and about what happens when you film someone without their knowledge and without their consent? Because the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy allocated £3 million for teacher training in this area for the whole of England and Wales. £3 million to address something the government's own words describe as a national emergency. The numbers are going in the wrong direction, and the justice system, by centering the offender the way it currently does, is not helping us turn them around. The UK has more of a problem here than it would like to admit. Now, rehabilitation, because I want to be honest about my thoughts on this. Do young people who cause harm have the right to rehabilitate? Yes, I believe they do. In 1993, in the UK, 2 10-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, abducted and killed a 2-year-old child named James Bulger in Liverpool. To this day, it remains one of the most devastating cases in British history. They were convicted of murder. They served 8 years in youth custody. They were released in 2001 with new identities. One of them, Robert Thompson, has not offended. He went through the process, he came out, he continues to live as part of society. The system in that case did something difficult. It punished and it worked toward rehabilitation. What happened in Fordingbridge did neither. Those 3 boys were not convicted to go into any structured program designed to make them genuinely confront what they did. They weren't required to sit with any serious reckoning about the harm they caused. They went home with orders to complete supervised activities in the community. That is not rehabilitation. That's avoidance dressed up as leniency. And the reoffending data gives us something worth considering. For young people who go through the youth justice system, the overall proven reoffending rate sits at around 31 to 32%. But for those whose first offence was sexual, that rate is lower, around 8 to 15%, depending on the cohort. which suggests that early targeted intervention can work for this group, but only if the intervention is real and meaningful, not an order that sends them home and hopes for the best. The system gave these boys the form of rehabilitation without the substance, and the girls they harmed are left to rebuild, figuring out a new reality that was forced onto them. So what actually needs to happen? Signing the petition matters. There's a petition in the UK going around about this sentence. Currently, over 45,000 people have signed it. But changing sentencing guidance and law moves far beyond a signature. It takes years. And while we wait for the law to catch up, we can't afford to be passive. Every one of us with a connection to a young person has a responsibility that doesn't and can't wait for legislation. Talk to the young people in your life specifically about what sexual harm is, about what coercion looks like, about consent, about the fact that filming someone without their knowledge is a crime, and about the fact that sharing that footage is also a crime. And speak to them about what to do if someone they know is in danger or has been hurt, and talk to them about what it could look like for them if they're in danger or have been hurt. Let's talk to the schools and ask the schools and ask the colleges, ask them directly, what do they have in place? And when was it last reviewed? Because sometimes a young person can't speak directly to their parent or guardian, but they might come to a teacher, a mentor, an older sibling, a friend, a coach. And what if that person is you? We can't outsource this entirely to the law and then be shocked when the law lets us down. The judge named the futures he was protecting, 3 of them explicitly, not the offence, not the lives already changed. James Baldwin wrote this in 1972, which is over 50 years ago. If one really wishes to know how justice is administered in a country, one does not question the policemen, the lawyers, the judges, or the protected members of the middle class. One goes to the unprotected, those precisely who need the law's protection most, and listens to their testimony. Go to the unprotected, listen to their testimony. That's what this episode, I think, has tried to do. That's what this conversation has to keep doing, because the law is slow, so slow, and the unprotected can't afford to wait. If you're listening to this and you have your own experience of sexual violence, whether you've disclosed or not, whether you've reported or not, whether you're in the middle of your own legal process right now, navigating a system that may feel like it wasn't built for you, because honestly, some of it wasn't, this episode is for you too. Irrespective of the systems that should be there to protect and support us, this is a reminder that we can't be passive in our choice to choose life, because every single one of us deserves to live, and to live abundantly, irrespective of what was inflicted upon us. The journey is not easy. I won't pretend it is, but it's not impossible to move through it. And I know that because I'm moving through it. This is not a race to the top of a mountain. It's steady pace. There will be great days and there will be low days. Both are part of it. But in both, choose you. I'm choosing me. I'm choosing me to survive. I'm choosing me to thrive through this. And I'm asking you to do the same. James Baldwin also said this: it took many years of vomiting up the filth I'd been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk on the earth as though I had a right to be here. Let me tell you, you have a right to be here, so walk like it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Like Me podcast. If anything I've shared has made you stop, think, or see yourself just a little bit clearer, fantastic. I love this for you, I love this for me, and honestly, I love this for us. And if this episode shifted something in you, give yourself a moment to sit with it. And if anything felt a little bit too heavy, speak to someone you trust. What I've learnt is that we don't heal in isolation, and you don't have to carry any of this alone. This space isn't about staying in survival mode. It's about lifting ourselves out of the dimension that has tried to keep us trapped and choosing a version of ourselves that's still becoming. If this resonates with you, share with someone who might need a reminder or a friend. And make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. I'm JK. Stay open, stay self-curious, and remember, it's our time to thrive.